So there's obviously plenty of stuff to unlock in the finals. Hell, I've played around 60 or so hours of the game and actually only just unlocked the final items that I didn't have. And although a lot of people do tend to use similar gadgets and weapons to each other, seeing as we've all kind of found out the best ones, today I wanted to go over some of the best items that I personally think are the most underrated items in the finals. Now, funnily enough, these are only for the light and medium classes. I actually tried to include all three classes, but to be honest, most of the heavy weapons and gadgets aren't really underrated, as I see most people kind of using everything in that class. So I did try to include everything, but unfortunately these are only for the light and medium classes. Now, starting off, we have the Sonar grenade, which is obviously available for the medium class, and this one, for those who haven't used it, is essentially legal wall hacks. Now, what you're going to do is throw this at anyone who is in the general area of it when it has been thrown will actually be revealed even through walls, which is obviously very, very useful. Now, this is really, really good when you are pushing objectives. If you need to throw this into a room, for example, where there are enemies camping on the objective, it's pretty much going to reveal anyone in that area. And the weird thing with this as well is that it feels like it doesn't actually have any range when it comes to the vertical range. So obviously horizontally, it'll only show enemies in a certain area, but it does feel as though if you threw this into the third story of a building, for example, it will actually reveal people on the 5th floor as well as the 1st floor. It feels like there's essentially no vertical range or limit to it, which is obviously very, very helpful for pushing any building that has an objective. Now, the other great thing about the Sonar grenade too is that it also sends enemies into a bit of a panic, which is obviously very good for you and your teammates. Sometimes all you need to do is throw this near an objective and it will actually just cause the enemies to flee. They know that they're detected because it kind of pops up in massive font on their screen saying that they are detected, and that causes a lot of people to panic and essentially run away from the objective, which can obviously be massive for you and your teammates. Now, next up, we have the glitch grenade, which is available for the light class, and this one is one that I don't see very many people using at all, if any, to be honest. I haven't really seen anyone using this in game. The only times I've really seen people using this is myself or people that I'm watching on YouTube, for example. For those who don't know what the glitch grenade does, it will essentially just counter or almost disrupt any item that the enemies have, whether that is a turret, whether that be mines on the ground, whether that even be grenades, and even down to the heavy's mesh shield and dome shield, for example. It will just disrupt any of those items and pretty much just like turn them off for a few seconds. This one is really solid for taking out teams that have set themselves up very well on an objective. If there's turrets and mines and stuff everywhere in a room where they are guarding that objective, throwing just one of these into a room will pretty much disable every single item in there, and that is obviously going to make it a lot easier for you and your teammates to push in. Now, like I said, it also does disable the heavy shields, both the mesh shield and the dome shield. We all know that if there's a heavy on the enemy team who is making the most of their mesh shield, that can be very, very deadly and often almost impossible to beat. So throwing one of these at a heavy who has got their mesh shield out, it will just disable it straight away, and you can obviously then try and clean them up, especially if you've got a teammate there to help you. There is almost nothing that they can do to win that gunfight in a 2v1. So the glitch grenades are especially good against the heavy class, and like I said earlier, they're also really great against those turrets and mines too. They will just completely disable them and give you enough time to pretty much just take out those turrets before they have any chance to shoot back at you. Now, next up, we have one that is definitely a little bit more niche, and this is the throwing knives once again for the light class. Now, these are very hard to use, I'm not going to lie, so it's hard to say that they're necessarily underrated because they do take quite a bit of skill to do well with. Generally, when I use these, I do not do all that well, but what I will say is if you do get good enough with the throwing knives, they are very, very deadly, and to be honest, they can probably be one of the best weapons in the game, provided you have a really, really solid aim. Although they do have a relatively slow rate of fire, they do deal a heap of damage, and there is also the alternate fire mode where you can hold down L2 and it will actually just kind of throw both at once for almost like double the damage of the regular throw. Now, these are also just very, very fun to use whether you are good with them or not, and to be honest, a good game with these kind of feels better than a good game with most other weapons, if that makes sense. Going like 20 and 10 with the throwing knives is going to feel a hell of a lot better than going 20 and 10 with like a regular weapon. So I do think these are slightly underrated. Like I said, very, very hard to use, but if you can get good with them, these are very deadly as your weapon choice. Now, before we go any further, if you guys are enjoying the video so far and you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There is plenty more finals content on the way, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, next up, we have another one for the medium class, and this is actually a weapon, that being the Model 1887. Now, obviously in this class, the FCAR and the AKM are probably probably the best in the class. They are by far the most used weapons in this class. But in my opinion, the Model 1887 is definitely a very underused weapon, and therefore obviously a very underrated weapon as well. The other assault rifles are obviously very handy for those sort of medium ranges, but the good thing with the Model 1887, it is by far better when it comes to those up close and personal situations. And that being said, it does still actually have really solid range on it too. For those who didn't know, this weapon actually shoots pellets, so it isn't just a shotgun where it's going to only work up close. It does actually have some level of range to it. Now, to be fair, fighting at range against an assault rifle, you are not going to win that gunfight. But for example, if there is a melee enemy on the other team, if you're like at mid-range fighting against them, you can actually still do very well against them. And to be honest, even enemies who are maybe half health or something like that, you can definitely still win some of those long range gunfights. On top of that, it is just generally very fun to use in my opinion. It has a really cool reload animation. It is just very smooth and fun to play with. And so definitely give this one a try if you haven't done so already. Now, next up, we have another one for the medium class, and this is the Zipline. Now, I see most people running the jump pad, and rightly so. It does help a lot with the sort of faster movement. You can escape some pretty tight situations with that jump pad. However, with that being said, I do think the Zipline can actually help in getting to the places that you kind of need to go. So obviously, a jump pad is more often going to just get you out of a tough situation or just get you to a rooftop or something like that. But the Zipline can really help you get to objectives. It can also obviously help you get to rooftops, but maybe a bit further away than those jump pads. And especially, for example, with the suspended structures, if people have taken out the regular zip lines and there's essentially no other way to get up there, then these are obviously very handy. You can obviously take down the suspended structures, but sometimes it is actually the better option to keep them up there. If no other enemies have the explosives they need to take them down, then if you can put a zip line up there, take out the enemies, and then knock your own zip line down, then all the other enemies have no way of getting up there either. So these are very, very underrated in my opinion. I actually ran this for a long time over the jump pad, and I do think it is arguably better than the jump pad. It's just that for the way that most people play, it's probably not as useful when it comes to being in a pinch. Now, lastly, we have the thermal vision, and this is for the light class. The thermal vision is incredibly good for any night maps, pardon the pun, but just look at the night and day difference in the visibility here. It is absolutely insane how much more you can see when you are in the thermal vision, and it will just generally increase your visibility, which is obviously very, very helpful in a lot of situations. Now, the main thing that makes this very useful is that it lets you see enemies who are cloaked, at least as far as I'm aware, which is obviously a hell of a lot of people. The cloak is by far the most used specialization in the game, at least for the light class anyway. And so this is going to be very, very handy for pushing those areas where you know that there's going to be someone cloaking. If you just turn on your thermal vision, then they're going to be sitting in the corner thinking that you can't see them, and all of a sudden you've got to jump on them and you're most likely going to win that gunfight. So the thermal vision is very, very solid, and like I said, it is especially good on night maps. Obviously, if you're on a day map, it's probably not quite as useful, but it can still be very useful for those cloaked enemies regardless. So anyway, guys, those are, in my opinion, some of the most underrated and underused items in the finals. I'm keen to hear if you guys agree or not, as well as hearing about some of your own favorites too, so be sure to leave a comment down below. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there in the arena.